Could AI be a silent factor that we haven't put in for China to re-emerge? Because, it has been a bit quiet since Corona, and there's a lot of talk that they've been doing AI development and they are as far ahead as the US. Now, does that change the game suddenly for them, or will they suddenly rise again like the phoenix?
Callie, I'm not sure that it's right that China is keeping pace with the United States in artificial intelligence. The story of the last couple of years has been massive breakthroughs with large language models and generative AI, and that's all been done by US companies. The Chinese are far behind, and if you talk to people in Chinese tech, they'll admit that. And of course, it doesn't help that they can't get access to the most sophisticated semiconductors because of US restrictions that essentially make it impossible for people to sell those semiconductors to China. So I think in the AI race, China is in fact in trouble. So I don't think that's the answer. And indeed, when you look at the kind of policies that Xi Jinping has been pursuing, if you look at the problems in real estate, if you look at the really dire demographics, it's hard for me to see how China keeps its growth rate at anything close to 5% over the next 10 years. In fact, I'll predict here and now on this show that China's growth rate is going down to low single digits in the coming decade. That won't be true for India. So I go back to my earlier prediction. India's going to overtake in terms of growth rate. China, it'll take a while to catch up in terms of aggregate gross domestic product. But it seems to me that that's the future this century, because India has all these advantages. And one other advantage, let's not forget, India is still a free society with a pretty free press and free elections. China has nothing like that. It's a one-party state with the old centralized Communist Party model. So that's another reason why I was an optimist about India 10, 12, 15 years ago, and I remain an optimist.
So you're long India, short China, and everyone watching at this time is going to love what you said. But in terms of power dynamics, how do you see that play out? 5 times larger economy than ours. They're building the biggest navy that the modern world has seen, and the low growth rates are now coming on the back of decades of some of the fastest growth the world has seen. So how do you see this play out in terms of great power rising?
Well, it's certainly true, and you're right to emphasize it, Rahul, that a huge amount of money has been spent and is being spent by China on defense. It's building a navy that, in terms of numbers of boats, is already the biggest in the world. It's building a nuclear arsenal, which doesn't get nearly enough attention, but is a huge threat to global stability, investing in hypersonic missiles. Right now, if there were a showdown between the US and China over Taiwan, I would not put money on the US winning that showdown. In fact, if you look at some...
Where would your money be?
Well, China would be more likely to win in the hot war because...
Even at this moment, not 5 years down?
Right now, because if you look at the war games that have been done, one of the striking features is how quickly the US runs out of precision missiles in a week. Now, if you're going to run out of precision missiles in a week, you're not in a great shape to win a war like that. China's manufacturing capacity is now so much greater than the US, probably 2 times greater, that if it came to a hot war, China would have some real advantages. And that's why my strong advice to American policymakers is don't do this. Let's not have a showdown over Taiwan. You're not in the kind of position you were in back in the 1990s, the last time there was a Taiwan Strait crisis.
Do you think Taiwan becoming a part of mainland China is inevitable at some point in time, in your view?
I hope not, because I love the fact that Taiwan is a free society. It's a true democracy. It shows that Chinese people can run a really exemplary democracy, and long may its autonomy continue. But you have to ask yourself, if its autonomy depends on an American military guarantee, how long can that last when the guarantee ceases to be credible? So I think China's investment in its military is a serious cause for disquiet. But it can't offset the fact that the economy is slowing, that you can't really fix the real estate sector, that the demographics are terrible. There's a scenario in which the population halves between now and the end of the century. It's hard for me to see that China's power is there for the long term. And youth unemployment's past 20%. And they won't even publish the figures, so we don't know what it is today, but it's certainly above 20%. These are serious problems for Xi Jinping. Now, they may make him take strategic risk. Sometimes it's when things are going badly that authoritarian regimes do reckless things. We've just had an election in Taiwan. So far this week, nothing bad has happened. I'm not going to tempt fate by saying it's not going to happen, but it feels like we probably avoided a crisis this year. But at some point in the next few years, I'm afraid there's bound to be a Taiwan crisis. And when that happens, that will be the real test of the US-India relationship. Where will India be in that scenario? My guess is not picking up the phone. Kind of busy this weekend.
In a historical sense, why do you think China whose main concern is to take over Taiwan at some point in time from their security perspective, wants to keep a hot border with India across the line of actual control. Farid was here just where you are yesterday, just over 40 miles of glacial snow, he said, to raise the specter of 2.5 billion people up against each other. That's not very smart from China's perspective, in the view of many here in Davos and elsewhere. Why are they doing it?
It is mysterious, but it's not the first time that the Chinese Communist Party had created a kind of permanent state of insecurity on its border. It was something that happened with the Soviet Union, if you remember, in the late 1960s, and came very close to a major war. So I think this is part of the Mao Zedong playbook that Xi Jinping has quite liked dusting down and using. Create tension with the neighbours, make sure that everybody at home realises there could be some kind of conflict. I think it helps domestically, but strategically, you're right, it doesn't make a great deal of sense, and it just drives India closer to Washington, which has to be an unintended consequence.